up at the Nile Club, and they wouldn't let us play. We were set up, the gear was set up, we were just going to go on stage, and they said, I'm sorry, we've been threatened, you can't play. And then we went on to a second place, I can't remember what it was called, we were playing 2 that night, and we played. Went to the hotel, got on the plane the next morning to go to another island and opened the newspaper and there was this club in ashes, just nothing there. It had been burnt down.
I've forgotten they stopped us playing the first time.
And it was like that for the whole time we were there. One major radio station would be saying we're coming, and another major radio station would be saying we're not coming. And so it went on. It was scary. It was a scary time.
Have you kept track with the evolutions in the music scene? Up to date, like recent bands, listening to recent indie bands, rock bands.
Do you know? I don't know how the others feel, but I for the first time in my life, over about the last 3 or 4 years, I stopped listening to things because I just 2 reasons. I mean, first of all, I don't find it easy to identify with all the dance and all the rap stuff that's so prevalent. I just find it hard to listen to, probably because I'm getting older. And the other reason is that most radio stations are such a pain, the DJs are such a pain in the neck to listen to. That's another reason. But I actually personally have found in the last few months I started listening again because there have been 1 or 2 records that have just knocked my socks off. I mean, like the Radiohead. When I first heard the single, the Radiohead single "Paranoid Android," it just gave me shivers. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And absolutely brilliant. Strangely enough, I did an interview yesterday with a new magazine, men's magazine, by the makers of Arena. We were talking about progressive rock, and this guy said, "Do you see any links?" And I could only do the interview because in the last couple of months I've actually started listening to people like The Verve. And The Verve actually said, one of the guys in The Verve said that Argent was his favourite group, strangely enough. which again made me listen to it.
Oh yeah.
It's funny you said that because
I don't know if it was him. I mean, I didn't hear it myself.
Well,
someone else heard it. Didn't he?
I've read this in an interview in NME as well.
Yeah.
Richard has said that.
Yeah.
Like Argent has been one of his major influences.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh,
but in an interview with The Verve
interesting.
2 months ago as well.
Oh, really?
And actually Richard said that 60s bands has been very influential, especially late 60s stuff, which apparently were influenced by you. So
It may be an interesting thing because I've been working with a lot of young groups because my son Matthew is a partner with me, and he's forced me to listen to some things, and I begin to see.
Can you remember?
No, because it's still the dance thing, the patterns, and the reason behind it. I still find it totally unmelodic, except when they use classic songs within that framework. But someone asked me on the radio, and I said exactly the same thing. He said, "Well, who would you be listening to at the moment?" And I said, "Radiohead." And I said, "Oh, really?" As if it was a total surprise. But I said, "No, it's the same sort of idea of creativity and expansion of ideas that I think that we were trying to aim at."
Strangely enough, the Radiohead single, that Paranoid Android single, to me, it sounds almost like, and it might be a weird relationship to make, but it sounds to me almost like the Beatles on the White Album.
Yes,
but a modern
yes.
sort of way of of expanding. I don't mean it sounds like it could be the Beatles, but it reminds me. They remind me a lot of that sort of experimentation, and also fantastically melodic. Very, very interesting arrangements.
And underplayed.
Yeah.
And the vocals underplayed, which remind me of sort of the way that Colin would treat things. I remember Fake Plastic Trees when I first heard that.
I must admit, I haven't listened to any of the modern bands at all, and I'm rather reluctant to admit it, but I haven't listened to anything. I do have a problem with radio, that a lot of the DJs drive me completely nuts.
Why? Because they keep waffling about.
They keep talking about themselves all the time. I'm not interested in them.
Isn't it? It's completely an assault all the time.
Yeah. It's a bit too high powered. I just like to listen to the music, and so that's one of the ways I used to learn what was happening, was listening to radio, but I can't listen to it anymore. I just can't.
I think the DJs now are coming from the club scene, and that is a total assault. I don't know whether you've been to any of the clubs. It is a physical, oral and visual assault, flashing lights, and this low bass, which you feel better.
I've never liked that sort of assault. Not even when we were sort of 17 and 18 years old. I like noise and excitement. You know, going to Rolling Stones gig at a club in those days was the equivalent in a sense. But that was all from the music. You know, the actual drive and the energy was all from the music. But a sort of visual assault and an assault of people announcing. I've always hated that. I've always thought that's horrible. You know, I just want to go away from it.
Have you ever heard any heavy metal or punk stuff?
Heavy metal or
Punk stuff.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about it?
Oh yeah.
Do you find it,
I've never liked heavy metal.
Yeah.
I quite like some heavy metal, some creative stuff. In fact, a close friend of mine is in it, but he's going actually more towards pop. And punk, I did like when punk came out. When I got past the being out of tune bit, what I did like about it was this resurgence of energy which had sort of happened in the 70s, and you've got these big stadiums, you know, where people were that big, and the atmosphere had gone, and like, I can remember going with Rod to see the Rolling Stones in a place as big as this.
And that was when it was really exciting, wasn't it?
It was. We were right up front, and it was full of this energy. And the thing I liked about punk was it took away from all the pretension that suddenly got right up there.
It was a swing of the pendulum, really, wasn't
absolutely, it? Just basic. And half the trouble was it was out of tune most of the time, and then some of them cultivated that, but the energy was much more exciting.
But do you know, that was the first time when one of the guys from the Presidency, what completely amazed me, when Paul Weller was in Jam, he said that Odyssey and Oracle was one of his favourite albums of the 60s. That was the first time I'd heard a more modern person actually.
Even more than that, right? I went to see some bands in Tunbridge Wells about a year ago, and there was a young band just starting up there, must have been about 17 or 18. And they did all the classic mistakes. They kept stopping it, saying the balance is wrong and everything like that. So I walked out, and embarrassingly, the lead writer then came up to me when I was watching the band I went to see. He said, "Oh, you're Chris White." He said, "I have to tell you, Odyssey and Oracle is my favourite album of all time." And they suddenly got these kids who weren't born coming up and telling you that, and suddenly the younger people are suddenly quoting back to us things that were done on Odyssey and Oracle. I mean, it was an embarrassing situation because I then had to be honest about where he'd gone wrong. But you have to be honest, you know. They have some nice sounds, but it was strange having people at a very, very young age quoting Odyssey and Oracle, and I've had 2 or 3 times had that happen. I don't know whether you found the same thing.
Yeah, occasionally, yeah. But what happened? Did you know what happened on that gig in New York, by the way? Remember that this tribute gig?
Yeah.
Did you hear what happened?
Yeah. There's been in a club called the Fez Club, I think it is.
Yeah, in the village.
And they did 3 nights of a tribute to the Zombies, and it was absolutely sold out every night. The guy phoned me last weekend, Sunday. He was telling it's Ed and Melanie.
Did he put it on?
He put it on.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Did they get my message?
Yeah, sure, they were really thrilled. We got your message, yeah. And it was
did bands get together and perform
all
songs?
sorts of different musicians, yes. They played Odyssey and Oracle in its entirety. And lots of other things. Someone did I Love You.
Do that?
Someone did I Love You, I think. And someone did some of my stuff. And some poor sod got stuck with Say You Don't Mind, and apparently he got the top note every night. And I said, well, that's more than
for me sometimes.
that's more than I've ever done. I don't know if you're familiar with Say You Don't Mind, but it has a very high note at the end. It's just a song I had a hit with here. And it was written by Denny Lane.
Do you know McCartney used to taunt, you know when Denny Lane was in McCartney's band Wings, he used to taunt Denny Lane with, because I knew the guy that was a roadie at the time, and many times he used to say, well, Colin Basso's version was much better than yours.
But someone was touring with Denny Lane just recently, and they said, 2 or 3 week tour, and he said he never once got that top note. So I felt a lot better then.
Yeah, finish yours, yeah.
Can I have a glass of house white wine, please? A glass of white, yes, house white, dry.
So that's great. So you're very authentic, and sometimes
I
being 100% with the top
that's right, yeah.
It's quite funny because in America there is this sort of underground, which is becoming more overground now, appreciation of the Zombies. And as Colin was just saying, that it's like 3 nights in New York and it's sold out. There was also an album put out from Seattle bands, which is like a tribute to the Zombies. And Alex Group was in it. Alex Sneeches, that's right.
Alex who?
Palau.
guy who
Alec
played-
Palaire.
He was playing.
Yeah, and he's got his own band that does zombies songs and things like that, you see. And it's quite fun listening to because they doing these copies of stuff that we did, and some of them are very funny actually because they nearly
Very good.
they are. I really enjoyed listening to it. They even copied the photograph
Well, when I
artwork.
first saw it, I thought it was us.
Yes.
And then I looked more closely, and I realised it was. I don't know who it was, but it wasn't us.
So it wasn't like modern versions of the Odyssey and Oracle. It was just the
It
same.
wasn't that particular album wasn't particularly all Odyssey and Oracle. It was assorted songs, but no, they were copies.
Yes.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly.
But actually, during the last few years, we have been observing a comeback. The 60s, the 60s trends have been coming back. What happened in the early 80s, when all the garage punk revived in the US, and in Britain you had a lot of garage bands, beat band, and all that stuff. This is happening right now as well. So, this is a very good trend as a selling point for your box as well. Because as people start listening to this music, they go back and they want to get a listen more to that original stuff.
Isn't it amazing when you think? I often think that when I was when we were in 1964, when we first turned professional, and just before that, I remember my dad saying to me, "Don't learn the guitar." Not that I ever did, He said, it'd be finished in a couple of years, and I just think that that is now 34 years ago, and if in 1964, there's no way I would listen. I wouldn't follow a line of popular music back to 1930. We weren't listening to stuff from 1930. I might listen to some jazz or something, but as a specialist interest. But it is so different. That really was the start of something which, against everybody's expectations, has just gone on and on. And in a sense, the real founding fathers, I suppose, were sort of Elvis and people like that in 1956. But the real explosion did come in about 1962 with the Beatles, and that started something which is, against everybody's expectations, has never gone away. It's become a continuing line that's gone all the way through. No one ever expected that.
And it is a pleasure to see it reinventing itself all the time. It's still, you said like
Especially
radio.
Oasis. Oasis, it's the same as the Beatles, just like listening to the Beatles.
Yes.
Especially the new single all around the world.
Yeah, and I love. Actually, it's quite fashionable not to like them too much at the moment, but I think they have Single Stand By Me from that last album they had. It's just fantastic. It's a great, it's a bit retro. They're not breaking any boundaries, but their songs I think really work.
Solid, very solid. Songs.
Yeah, beautifully work.
So what do you think has changed, viewing the music industry right now? What do you think has changed from when you were starting?
Costs, I think.
Costs?
And no young band can really start without the top range of equipment and a video and spending months in the studio. And so when we started, you didn't get advances. You just got the chance to make an album. And we did 3 songs finished in 3 hours in those days. And in our second session, we did 5 songs. It was through the night. When we got the phone call from New York saying we were number 1, 5 songs. You look at it's got it in the books there.
Apart from that, do you think that there are so many more substitutes in the market that it's very hard for people actually to, for bands to create a fan base, a loyal fan base? Because there's so many bands coming out on a daily basis. Like, it's not like early 60s when you had 5 good names and everybody would be listening to them. Now you had, millions.
There were a lot there in the 60s. You see, I remember when the Beatles broke, the record companies went up to Liverpool, do you remember, and signed up every single band. And some of them just didn't make it. There were lots of bands that people were playing for fun.
Just don't remember them.
No, you don't remember them.
I think one of the sad things now is that it's very hard to sort of get an idea for a band and an idea for a song, go in and record a record and it be a hit, so 2 or 3 months later. The whole thing is, you just need huge financial backing, it seems, to get a hit singles, the videos, and you get a major record company because they've got all the distribution tied up, and it's a huge business operation where there's a lot of spontaneity in those days, and we'd be sitting here now talking about a record and it would be in the shops in 4 or 5 weeks time and it's sort of chance of being a hit. But I don't think that's true.
You've got to remember, in that box set there's about 100 songs on there. That's 3 years, right? And now people think about having an album out every 18 months or something. And the stuff that we put down, because it had to be put down quickly.
It was a single every 3 months in those days,
Yeah,
wasn't it? And the
that's right.
Beatles as well.
Yes,
Used to they'd release 4 singles a year. You'd never get that now. I mean,
Yeah.
it is much harder. Also, things like school dances and there were a lot of venues for young bands to play there because there weren't discos, which then came later, or clubs in the same sense as there are now. You know, the live music was what people went out socially to hear.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you were dating a girl or going looking for a girl, you'd go to a dance, you know, and there'd be a live group. So as soon as we started playing, you know, there were places where you could try and get booked into. You still had to convince people, but
And you
in St
got
Albans,
paid.
and you got paid, yeah.
Because nowadays they don't get paid.
Yeah.
You're playing all the clubs around London, because I've been working with some young groups, and they now give you out tickets. Then you give out to your friends, and if the friends come and have a ticket, you get £1. So the bands are walking away with like £15 to £20, and it costs them 50 quid to get there and set up, you know. And some places actually charge you to play. And so where's the opportunity? And the other factor that is a sad factor is that the big companies, there's only really 5 companies now, and they're tending to be run by accountants.
Most of those are owned by Sony.
Yes, that's true. And I've been into recently to a big company, and the fella there was really from our era, and he was saying, I'd love to go with some of these things, but we're now responsible for every single penny we spend. And I'll have to get my financial controller in. He comes in, he's 25, right? And he's got no interest in the music. It's just the percentage of chance of whether we'll make up the money. The financial controls have become really front. There's very few people of imagination at the heads of companies, because of all people losing their jobs or trying to keep their jobs. They have to play the company game, and so they very rarely now take chances. There are exceptions, but in our day there were people who went with things.
Well, I mean, Colin's so right. It costs so much money now to put a band out for a record company. In those days, I mean, I've got a friend who recorded a couple of records in his bedroom, not dance records, I mean a group, you know, and released them, and he stood a chance. He had a hit with a couple of them as well. But these days, you've got £60,000 on a video. You know, you've got a huge marketing campaign. And a huge marketing campaign. You know, all that's going on, and record companies aren't interested in building people's careers now because it's so expensive. So if they put the first album out and it's not a success, you know, they're not going to do anything else. Whereas in those days, because it only cost a couple of thousand or less to put a record out, you know, they'd start and say, well, maybe that one didn't happen, but now we'll go with this one and see what happens here. And they thought of it on a longer term basis, and in the end, of course, that's what makes the record companies really big money. You know, when you get someone who does work his way through and starts to have a longevity of career. And even people like, you know, Clapton has been going for so many years.
Yeah, but trends that were more rigid in those days. You know, now you can see trends alternating every month. Like, you know, once there was rap, then came trip hop. Trip hop came out of nowhere and it broke into the market.
Yeah, but every change in rhythm they call a new sort of music. We just call it a song with a different rhythm.
Working with my son who does all these things, or sequence and works with people, and he said, oh well, no, the beat's now gone up to 135, and now they call that something else, and different clubs will speed their records up and they'll bring out something else. It's all dressing. It's I actually have begun to find something interesting in some of the dance stuff. But it's a total formula. It's 8 bars of this, 8 bars, you bring in something else, you know. And then the art is now in the programmers, where they're not just giving the straight beats, they actually shift them a little bit. Things like Pete Van Hook's been doing naturally for all his life, and the real drummers have been.
And talking about dance and sample. Now, I heard something the other day, and I said to Mark, and it started, and I said, oh, I really like this. He said, no, it's not the record you think it is. And it was actually, you know the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony. Well, that's a sample from a Rolling Stones track, right?
There's another record coming out.
And there's another record coming out that's sampled.
That's right.
The Verve's
That's
record,
it.
which itself is a sample of the Rolling Stone thing. So you think,
Is that string riff?
Yeah.
I heard it. It's on top of I saw it on top of the pots.
Right.
Crazy.
Colin, when you came back in the early 80s from the US, right, you had major problems putting out your own work.
Yes, I did.
Why? What happened?
I'll try and put it in a nutshell, if I can. I left CBS in the mid-70s to go to Rocket Records, And let me start a little bit earlier than that. CBS wanted me to have an international manager. In fact, between us, we've been having quite a bit of success. Mostly Rod and Chris had produced my stuff, and I'd had quite a lot of success. But we'd never made it in America. They wanted me to have an international manager. So I was introduced to someone called Barry Cross, who just helped to break Cat Stevens in America, and eventually I signed to his management company. But as soon as I signed to his management company, he wanted me to leave CBS, so CBS steered me towards the manager. And as soon as I got the manager, he wanted me to leave and go to Rocket Records, and it got very complicated. I went to Rocket Records, but the trouble was, when the Rocket Records deal ran out, it was a slightly grey area whether I still owed CBS some product. And my legal advice was I didn't, but CBS felt I did. And so for a couple of years, maybe longer, maybe 3 years, I couldn't work. And I got very close to about 2 weeks away from going to the High Court, which was a bit scary. So that's why it was a lawsuit with CBS.
But it was all resolved.
In the end, it was resolved because I was
died.
No, it's terrible.
They burned down like the club in the Philippines.
For 3 years I've been using lawyers to try and sort this out. And then I got involved with another powerful manager, Eric Wilson, who did all the Alan Parsons stuff, and he took Oberstein for lunch, and they sorted it out over lunch. That's the way it has to be done. You try and do it through lawyers, all you do is spend money.
Have you read The Hitmen, by the way?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Well, that's how it should be read, Hitmen.
Yeah.
You like that, enjoy that.
Yeah, that's how it's done, yeah. So that was the problem there.
Right.
It was awful. Oh, another thing, I signed an EMI deal with a band called Keats, which were an offshoot of the Alan Parsons. Called Keats.
Oh yeah, I read about that, but I've never heard it.
Well, it's an offshoot of the Alan Parsons.
Right.
What's it called?
Project.
Yes,
And it was a big deal with EMI, a huge amount of money. And I was just reading through, I haven't read the contract until we were in there to sign it, because Eric Wilson took care of all that stuff. And I just happened to see, just where I was going to write my name, it said just above it, you guarantee that you are free of all litigation to sign this deal. I was going to the High Court in 14 days at that point to be sued by CBS. But I had to sign it. It was $250,000, that deal. And all the other band were relying on me.
Sleep very well that night.
No, because not only could I have been sued by CBS, which I was, but I could then be sued by EMI because I wasn't free. I tell you, it was a difficult time. I had to get my signature, I'm sure, was like shaking.
That's not mine. That's not mine.
I had no choice. What could I do?
Didn't know that one.
If I invited you to come down to Greece and play, right? If I invited you to come down to Greece and play just for one night, would you do that? If the money was good, right? You would have 1 week vacation.
I wouldn't do it.
It's not just one night. It's not just one night. It's a matter of
Rehearsals.
and going back on something and trying to relive something.
I think it was good fun to just do those 2 songs, no rehearsals. It really was like a part of a party. It was very light. But it's too late to get us back to it. It's 30 years,
Anyway, that was a celebration. You're talking about a gig. And there's a lot of difference, and the river's run very long since then.
The river's run very long.
What's your next album?
So tell me about the future, right? What are your future plans, career plans, related or unrelated to the Zombies?
Well, Colin's going to insurance. No.
I think I'm too old for insurance. I'm recording an album at the moment,
Tell me about it.
and it's be coming out on Mystic Records, hopefully this spring. I hope. There is some wood.
Yeah, Colin's got his. He's back doing live things in the last 18 months. The first time for 20 years or something.
Something like that. Yeah, I've done 2 tours in the last year, and I'm doing another one in the spring.
You should get Colin's band over to Greece. It's fantastic.
Are you playing Manchester?
Oh, in this tour coming up, I'm not sure, but we'll be there or thereabouts, I'm sure.
Who else is playing in your band?
Don Airy, who's played in Rainbow, Whitesnake, Gary Osborne, Gary Moore, and Ozzy Osbourne. Sorry.
Which one is it? What was?
Don Airy, his name is. He's a keyboard player.
He played with Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
He was the bass.
Yeah, well, he leads the band on keyboards anyway. I think probably he'd be the only one you would really know of. But the others have all played with quite well respected. Yeah. It's a good band. So that's what I'm concentrating on. Really, what I wanted to do was to play live again, and that has led to me doing an album that is basically using those musicians.
What's the album title?
I think it's going to be called The Light Inside.
Not the Latin Seeds.
No. So that's me anyway.
Right.
Well, I've done quite a lot of record production over the last 10 years or so with my colleague Peter Van Hook, and we've had some successes with first 2 Denise Tikram albums that were multi-million sellers, and Joshua Caddison, we're just about to do his third album. We did the first one, which was a multi-million seller, and we've just completed an album by a South American artist called Soraya, whose first album we did, and so this is the second album. And apart from that, I've just, as I said to you earlier, I've just completed the classical project, which has got 3 of my own compositions on it. But apart from that, it's stuff by Chopin, Bach, Elgar, Ravel, and I want to continue with that. And I'm initially going to sell that on the internet. And the site is www.rodargent.com if anyone wants to visit it. But I may also sign to a company as well. But I mean, that's really what's I'm loving. Just getting to the piano and practicing as much as possible and trying to develop that. But I'm not going to turn my back on the recording side of things. And there is a chance next year or this year coming up that, because Argent did a few charity gigs over the last couple of years, and we enjoyed them so much that we might try and get some tracks licensed from Sony in America and put out a sort of best of compilation and maybe even record a couple of new tracks. And we've been asked to go and do a couple of weeks touring over in the States. So that's a distant possibility. Who knows about that?
Right. Chris?
I'm still working, writing and producing. I'm working with my son Matt White and my wife Viv Bouchera. We've been doing stuff for animation, music and TV stuff as well, but also working on a musical which is finished, but with Arlene Phillips. Arlene Phillips is the choreographer who did Starlight Express, and she also did the staging of the Lord of the Dance thing. She's also directing and choreographing the new Saturday Night Fever that's going to be at the Palladium in a month's time. Yeah, as a musical. So I've been working on that quite a lot, and still writing and also working with young groups and singers and getting them deals.
Like?
Well, there's a young girl called, she's called Kinan, and she's signed with a company. We started off managing her, but we're not anymore. We've given that over to somebody else. And some young groups we're working with and advising and everything like that. But the writing's the main thing, just get the creativity going.
Right. Excellent. What do you think about the New Rolling Stones stuff? Have you heard it? The New Rolling Stones.
New Rolling Stones?
No, I haven't heard of it.
It's crap. No, it's really
Is
bad.
it?
Yeah, I sort of lost interest.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's one reason that Rod has always said, that's the one reason not to get back together again.
Try to maintain the image as it was back then, because you might spoil it if you get back and do something else. Yeah, true.
I mean, they're going out on the road because they want to top up their bank account.
Yeah.
Which is fine, nothing wrong with that in itself. But when we started, as I said before, we did it because we were totally enthusiastic about what was going on. I think you've got to try and retain that. Otherwise, your life's over, and then you're just trying to rake over the coals, aren't you?
The lovely story about that, Laurie Mansworth was telling me about the Rolling Stones. because Keith used to take his dad on tour with them all the time, and his dad was sitting in his chair at the side of the stage. Keith Richards.
Oh yes, did he?
Yeah, and he was drinking, and a roadie came up to him and said, "Be careful! If you carry on drinking like that, you look like your son."
It's wonderful. Do you know, I read in something about Keith Richards recently, and he was saying that he used to sing in a choir, a very good choir, and he was really bitter because he said when your voice breaks, it's all over. You know, they chuck you out, and he said I was taken away from my studies because I was a good choral singer. He said, and then my voice broke, and they chucked me out, and what happened to that year when I should have been studying? You know, I never really caught up. Really?
This is so like Keith Richards. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very, very much.
I hope it's a help.
Oh yeah, it'll be
Well, it's going to be out off the top of our heads. Okay. Jeez, I mean, I've got to say she's not there really, because it's.
And you've got
I can't. Yeah, I've got to say those two.
Yeah.
But then, what else? I would actually say Butcher's Tale. Honestly, would. I mean, coming back to that was one of the real shocks to me, and not having heard it for many years. I said to the guys actually that it's not because they're both just sitting here, but for not hearing things for 30 years, I couldn't believe how good the bass playing was actually.
He actually phoned me up 30 years later, and so when they came out, he said, I have to tell you, it sounds great, you know.
I thought, bloody hell, it's such great bass playing, and it sounds so great. The bass sounds so great as well.
That was Jeff Emmerich, wasn't it? First of all.
And it's your bass as well. Your bass as well. And anyway, well, I'll kick off that. Oh,
That's
Jesus,
three.
That's three.
I tell you what I do like, and that's walking in the sun.
That sounded great.
Yes.
To it. There were a lot that did actually.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
liked Carousel 44 because it's a very refreshing song. It's so different, and especially the lyrical content. It was very unusual for that time. And I like Rose for Emily as well.
Oh, that's a lovely song. I also liked I'll Keep Trying, actually. I really
That was a real surprise.
Yeah, that was a
hearing
great track.
That was a real surprise, and that was never released, was it?
No.
We never. Why didn't we release that? It's been mad.
But I remember actually that was a pivotal point because you and I wanted to stay behind. It was at Lansdowne that we were finishing it, and then there came the big point about well, we want to be here, and they said, well, it's not a good idea
Was
having.
it that track?
Yes.
Was it really?
Because it was the extra harmonies and everything, you know. And that's afterwards that they got round that we wanted to produce ourselves. So had nothing against Ken because he was a great influence and very, very helpful in setting up the fact that we get our own money. You know, that was
Ken Jones, our producer.
Yeah. But then there was always this quiet, and after that track, I remember specifically because Terry Arnold had said, "Well, Rod and Chris are staying," and Ken Jones said, "They're not, you know." And I remember that very clearly.
I sort of remember that happening.
Yes.
I didn't remember which track it
Yeah.
was.
Do you ever have any major conflicts before gigs, like beating each other and?
Yeah,
Every night. What are you talking about?
Do you ever do you ever actually beat each other?
Oh, well, we never actually hit each other.
No.
But we got. I mean, the word, as Colin said, you know, there were nights when we were screaming at each other, and then the curtain back.
Oh, but after the gig, so it was a free for all. No.
Before the gig was a sanctuary.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Quite boring, really, isn't it? But there you are.
We're too busy chasing girls to fight one another.
Yeah.
Or them chasing you?
Well, one would like to think so.
Well, the ones that were chasing were a bit too young. No. I've gone through enough trouble recently. But, no, you got your lot there.
Yeah, Rod, were you another rugby player?
No. There were one or two Playboy centre poles, I seem to remember.
Yeah.
Forget all this.
The fact that actually we weren't making any money on the gig side, we were ripped off on that side, and Colin, Hugh and Paul didn't have any more money, and we actually did the album, and to be quite honest, nobody liked it first of all, did they? Except English people put it out. Band like we loved
Nobody
it.
in the business liked it. Yeah.
America wasn't going to put it out.
We got some great reviews actually. Strange enough.
Yes.
I've got some. I came across some old photostats, the reviews at the time, and it's that one of them was Zombies Fade Away with the classic album. You know.
But when we first played it to managers, agents, and record companies, there was no reaction.
They weren't releasing in America, were they?
No. And we've got to a point where we've been playing for 3 years. I think we were all tired. And as Chris was saying, the non-writers were actually, I know it's not a very artistic thing to say, but they're actually flat broke. And then when you finish what you think is a lovely piece of work, and you don't get the reaction you're expecting, it's a bit heartbreaking, really. And I think that's the root of how we broke up.
But actually, it sold around 1 million copies in the US in '69. Odyssey and Oracle.
No, Odyssey and Oracle didn't. I mean, the time of the seasons ended up selling 2 million.
Oh, right.
So Odyssey and Oracle was only a very small hit in America. It made the charts, but it didn't really sell very well. Strangely enough, in the last 15 years, it's sold far more every year than it ever did, when we first brought it out.
Right. Wasn't actually this decision the outcome of the scene actually evolving into something different than what it was when you started playing? Like there were a lot of psychedelic bands starting introducing a lot of experimental sounds. It was the Traffic, the Pretty Things, with S of Sorrow, was the Traffic with Holy Mashu.
Well, I don't actually think that was the reason, because in fact, strangely enough, a lot of the critics, when they're talking about Odyssey and Oracle now, say that they feel that the album was ahead of its time, and in fact it would have been much more, it's one of the reasons why it's a lot more appreciated now than it was then. But I think it was a case of, as Chris said, particularly Colin and Paul, as I remember it, wanted really to get out of the rock and roll business, to be quite honest. And Chris and I passionately wanted to stay in it. And without Colin, there would have been absolutely no point in the band continuing, because his voice was such a seminal part of the band, And that was one of the reasons. I mean, that was one of the main reasons, as I remember it. And once the album was finished, we wanted to try and get it released. We wanted to do as well as possible. But Chris and I were already starting to move on to our next project, which was in fact the production company we had together, and Argent, the band Argent.
How do you feel when you're playing with Argent, like, changing completely your musical style, targeting completely different audiences? How was that shift from the Zombies to Argent?
It wasn't as extreme as you would imagine, because actually, strangely enough, I haven't listened to any of our old stuff for many years, and in fact, this anthology was one reason for me to start listening to everything. And at the same time, I started listening to the first 2 Argent albums, which I think were the best Argent albums we made, which were before we were successful. Actually, the first Argent album is very like the Zombies in many ways, and it's very much a continuation of what we were doing with the Zombies, I think. And after that, things got different. But in a sense, as I say, I think our best work was done in those first 2 years before we had a hit.
So it was just boredom out of touring constantly for 3 years.
I think it was boredom, really. I think it was actual financial. I think didn't we agree at one point, if Carousel 44 didn't hit?
I don't remember. That rings a bell.
Yeah,
But I mean,
I think we were drained. I felt drained.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time since we'd had any success, and it's very hard to keep putting in 100% enthusiasm into a project when you haven't had any success for such a long time. And coupled with what we said before, financial problems, we'd never really made any money. We were all living at home, living very normal lives, but we were still broke.
Well, the 2 writers had, Chris and I had made money because of the hit. We did have many hit songs around the world, actually, in terms of us and other people doing it. I mean, Chris had a #1 in America and Japan with "I Love You" by People, and so I mean, what Colin said is very true. That the other 3. Actually, I remember Colin during recording the album saying, I just had enough of the business, I just want to get out. But Chris and I felt differently, but then it was easier for us to feel differently because we had the income from the writing.
Yeah, I mean, as I remember, and I don't think, because one of the interesting things about this album is that you realise that everybody remembers things differently. I've read the booklet and I thought, well, I don't remember it like that at all. But as I remember the actual
What's the name of the band?
in Chris's flat, and Paul, our lead guitarist, said, well, listen guys, I actually would like to leave the band.
Yeah. Sure.
And then Rod said, well, if Paul's leaving, I think we should finish it. But my part in it was, I think I'd gone very quiet. I wasn't really contributing very much, So perhaps if I'd been a bit more positive and put a bit more energy into it, it wouldn't have happened. I don't know. Oh, can I have a look at the menu? Sorry.
So how did you feel moving into the insurance business after being at the peak of fame, then moving into the insurance business?
Well, I know it's a weird thing to say, but I enjoyed my year in the insurance world. I mean, it could have been in any job. I took the first job that was offered to me, and the regular hours and regular money, and I know it sounds weird, but the sort of camaraderie of a big office, it was very refreshing, because in the music business you spend short periods living right on top of one another, and then I think you have long periods that I found could get quite lonely. So it was a nice change for me.
Right.
But at the end of the year, I mean, he used to say it was nice for a year, 2 or 3 years probably. I would have been going nuts, but at the end of the year, I was back in the business again.
So you did go nuts.
That's right. Did you ever think of staying in the US, where you had, your major success, instead of returning to Britain, like Eric Burden, when he left Britain, he went to the US. He led a much better life than he did when he was with the Animals.
Didn't you think of that sometimes, Colin?
Well, I did go and live there, but in the 70s.
Didn't you talk about it? I mean, this is the first time I ever sort of remembered it. Do I recall you ever saying that when we were together? Why, we could actually go and live over?
I might have done. I think it did sort of vaguely go through my mind.
We
But
had some good jobs over there.
yeah, good insurance. But I think we were all very settled in our little area of Hertfordshire, and I think that's where we felt comfortable, really. But it might have been a good idea. It's a bit late now, but...
No, it never appealed to me personally. I don't think so. It's never anything I wanted to do. I don't think it did to you, Chris, did it?
Not to America. There's certain places I like in America, but I still seem to come back home. I mean, I lived in Spain for 5 years,
Yeah.
and that was wonderful, but far too relaxed.
I'm going to ask you about that later on.
Oh, right. Okay.
Don't tell me now. I'm going to ask him later on.
But that whole point is, you do tend to come back. It's been quite a pleasure this past 6 months doing this box set thing with Alec Palaio and Roger Armstrong, and it's been, I don't know how you two felt, but it's been a total eye-opener for me, and it's been nice meeting again, and it doesn't seem like 30 years.
No.
It doesn't seem like 30 years at all, so you do come back, and it was such a good period for the Zombies, and it was where we went to school, where we grew up, and it was like a growing up thing. It was like a rite of passage in a way, and so you do come back to it. It's like going back to the homeland.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, it looks like vodka, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Why do you think you were so highly acclaimed all over the world, apart from your home country, England?
What, then or now?
Sorry?
Do you mean then?
Yeah. I mean, you were regarded as a medium breakbeat band,
Yeah.
and in the US, we may say that you actually influenced the entire garage punk movement. Everybody who used to play the Vox organ with the speed as you did. So why didn't you gain this reputation here? What was wrong?
It's very hard to say, isn't it?
I mean, one sort of trite answer is that if you knew what was wrong, you would put it right, and you sort yourself out. I've often wondered if, our initial image as we were portrayed to the press was of quite intelligent schoolboys, and I've often thought, this is with the benefit of hindsight, because I didn't understand about image and things then, but I wonder if that put people off a little bit.
I think it did, but I think it was a pathetic mistake in the sense that it all came out of one meeting with the Decca Press representative who said, "Oh, how are we going to sell this band? They're very lazy.
What's the angle?
What's the angle? And they said, well, what can we say? What was different about it? Well, you got a few O-levels, haven't you? Well, how many have you got between you? Well, that's a lot." And that went out in the press release, and then it just got endlessly repeated again and again. And it was pathetically stupid because, in fact, Mick Jagger was at university, and people in the Manfred Mann band were all university graduates. It's crazy, but as Colin said, we got tarred with this thing, and people are just so lazy. And also the other thing is that our first hit over here our only hit in this country, She's Not There, didn't even make the top 10. So we didn't start off with as big a hit here as we ever made. I mean, it was a big hit, but I mean, it made number 11. That was the highest it made. And you know, in America it was number 1, in Japan it was number 1. I mean, all over the world it created bigger waves, you know. So, I mean, we never even had the profile. Strangely enough, after I'm thinking of Arta actually, more than anything, but I think, was Time of the Season on the Rock Machine? It was, wasn't it? It was on the Rock Machine album. So, in a sense, our biggest selling record worldwide, which was Time of the Season, wasn't ever a hit of any sort in this country. And later on, when it got put on to Rock Machine Turns You On album, it became a very big cult track.
That was the first compilation album ever. No one had done a compilation of all different artists, and Time of the Season was on that. And
so it was obviously in the grooves because people got to know it and love that track. You know, over here, that's how most people in this country know of that track. In America, it's just a huge hit. Yeah.
So you never actually liked this whole image making thing. You never were into it like the Beatles.
Into the what?
The image making thing.
Image making.
Yeah.
Well, no, the image we were given, wasn't it? None of us were into it. Just thought it was ridiculous.
I'm not sure that we really understood.
Yes, thank you.
We really understood image in those days. You know, we were only 18 or 19 years old. It was all new to us.
And it was new anyway. You've got to remember that, as Rob was mentioned the other day, only the second group after the Beatles to be a hit, to get number 1 in America with our own song that was written for the band. And so there wasn't any previous experience to the level which the Beatles had pushed everything.
Do you know, and people also, even now I read about in reviews, everything that's going on now, about the way we used to wear suits and things, but listen, all those early pictures were taken in 1964. All the bands wore suits then. It wasn't us.
Stones.
The Rolling Stones were wearing suits then, for God's sake. And the Beatles were wearing suits and ties. This was it. That's because most of the photographs that exist of us were taken, you know, in 1964. That's the reason. That wasn't anything particularly unusual.
So you all started off as a spontaneous, getting together and playing, trying to reach the idols you grew up with, like Buddy Holly and Miles Davis, and going through a process of demystification, if you want, when you demythologize everything. Then you started seeing how it works, and you lost interest in it. Could you say that? Should I repeat that?
There's a lot of long words in there.
Sorry. I've been told so many times. Those big words.
I certainly don't think Rod and Chris lost interest. I mean, they were always determined.
But you came back in again.
It was me. And it wasn't so much that I don't think I lost interest in it. I think I felt the business had lost interest in me.
Right.
So I had a little dip in commitment.
And Paul.
Paul too.
But everybody came back into the business.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Paul and Hugh went on to work for CBS, although they never worked professionally as musicians again, really. They went on to work for CBS.
They worked as engineers, weren't they?
No, Paul was A&R, and he signed up ABBA.
Yeah.
Bruce Hornsby. He signed loads of people.
Yeah, Mr. Yeah.
And Paul McCartney, he managed Paul McCartney for a while?
He worked with Paul McCartney.
He worked with Paul McCartney.
And he always embarrassed Paul because every time Paul came, he said, "Oh, yeah, she's not there," and he used to play it on the guitar, you know. Did you hear that? Paul said, every time I go in, he said, "Oh, no one told me."
But you know, far from Chris and I losing, interest in the mythology and the feeling of the passionate feeling that we had about music. I mean, one of the reasons why the Zombies didn't get back together again after we had a huge hit in America and Japan and many other places with Time of the Season was because we were just so heavily involved in the next project, and our interest, and passion about what we were doing meant that we just wanted to continue on that path rather than say in a calculated way, let's just reap the rewards of the success we've had with Time of the Season. We could have gone back over to the States and made, many quick bucks over there because we were offered lots of money to do some shows, obviously. And we decided not to do that because, in fact, our real interest was still 100% with music.
In fact, that was I would say that exactly. The driving force was never, we can make a lot of money.
Never.
It was, really having fun with it. But on the other hand, when with people like Colin, Paul and Hugh weren't making enough money to survive, then that's a consideration.
And the thing I'm trying to stress though is that you never had this, big band image. You were more like low profile, or I think so, because
Press me out, yeah. If anyone wants somebody else.
Oh, I want toast.
Did you want something to eat?
no.
Not for me.
I mean, I haven't heard many interviews, but the stuff I've heard on the box, Colin's voice sound, tender and low. You didn't have this outbreaks like the Who did, where they were screaming on stage, smashing guitars.
Oh, we had our moments. I always remember one time, Rod and I were having a bit of an argument. I can't tell you the words that were being used. There was a stage where there were proper curtains, and Rod and I were swearing the worst words possible at one another. I don't know what about. And this was just before they put all the curtains back, and somebody switched the PA on.
Oh no.
So I was using, I don't know which one it was, the very worst words you can think of, and suddenly it boomed out all over the place. And then at that second, the curtains went back, and we went, nothing was happening,
What was that?
Where?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
America?
I think it was in America.
I remember what happened. He'd stayed with a girl the previous night.
Oh, I'm sure I had.
And
Chris liked.
sorry?
Which Chris liked? No.
Which Chris liked?
I don't know.
No, it was me, apparently.
And then instead of getting on the tour bus,
Oh, I remember
he'd
that.
allowed himself to be driven 800 miles the next gig, and he didn't turn up until about 1 minute after we were due to go on.
Technical pitch, yes.
And that's why you never got the keys to the Freedom of Pensacola.
I know, I was pretty upset about that.
But actually, it is true to say that generally speaking, we were more like Radiohead today. We tended to tidy up hotel rooms before we left, as they say.
Excellent.
Did you ever meet with the business?
Matt McCartney. Do you have any of you lot? No, of course no. I met McCartney.
They were playing at the same time, you see, so they didn't come to our gigs. Why should we go to theirs? No, it wasn't like that at all. It's just that we were on a different circuit. In fact, we were recording at Abbey Road.
Yeah, but it was shortly after. I mean, we used the same engineers, the same studio, but it was just after Sgt. Pepper's when we did Odyssey and Odyssey. Weeks or months.
And they used Studio 2 and we were in 3, weren't we?
They did use 3 a little bit, but mostly 2. Now, I remember we were backstage. You remember they used to do those Christmas shows at Finsbury Park? I think we went because Rod's cousin Jim, who was in Argent, was in one of the opening bands, the Mike Cotton Sound. So we saw them backstage, and I remember George Harrison walked by and sort of went, "Hey up," that was it. Oh, I've arrived.
Like Peter Van Hook. When he met the Beatles, he was putting this television programme together at Abbey Road. He met the Beatles recently because he really wanted to interview them. He could never get the answer out of their office at all. He just happened to see them walking up, and he walked up to. He managed to get them to do it anyway. They said, "Yeah, sure, it's easy." But when he was so amazed to see them walking down the corridor, he said, "I've just got to introduce myself." He said, "I'm." He forgot his name. He was so flummoxed, he couldn't remember. Paul was looking at him saying, strange.
This happened recently?
Yeah. About a year ago.
What are they doing right now? Do you have a clue?
No. What, the Beatles?
Yeah. What kind of business are in or something?
McCartney's just had his biggest selling album for some time, hasn't he?
Oh, yes, that's true.
And Flaming Pie, and then he's done that symphonic thing with Carl Davis, Standing Stone. I don't think George Harrison's doing much, is he?
I don't really know.
Pose.
What, have you got a PC or a Mac?
250 hits, 260 hits already. No one knows it's A, actually. I haven't got a link on this page or anything.
Somebody among you mentioned to Alec that you've been reuniting for some studio sessions over the last 30 years. Is it true? Or is it in box set? Something like
We've
studio?
done some jingles.
Oh, right, right.
We did Tell I Know, I think, didn't we?
Right.
This American producer came over for us to do Turno. Everyone except Paul, because Paul's in America, and so Clem Clemson, I think, played guitar.
John Verity.
Was it?
I can't remember.
Anyway, the producer insisted on booking 24 hours in the studio.
Oh no.
So we could get it right. We thought we would need 24 hours. Well, they played, I think they got it first take or second take, and then I got the vocal about third take or something like that. So he booked the studio for 24 hours and we took about 40 minutes in all.
And he said, and Rod told him how to shorten it. If you put this bar in here, put that bar there, got it right down to the right time, it was done.
I think what Alec was talking about was when we had the launch party for the album. We played two songs, which is the first time in 30 years. That we
And
played
apart from that, you mean the jazz cafe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which songs did you play? Apparently she's not there.
Yeah.
And which other?
Time of the season.
We can remember.
Yeah. See, we didn't rehearse.
You didn't rehearse.
Was it really spontaneous?
Oh yeah. I said when we got up on stage in that room that night, it was the first time we'd all been together at the same time in 28 years. So we hadn't played, and so we just got on stage and played it.
How did it work out?
Great.
Yeah.
I've seen the video.
Surprisingly good. Yeah, when I played
Except we
for
couldn't
an hour and a
remember
half,
finish.
first of all. And when I came off, I didn't know if they were going to come on and play or not, because it hadn't been decided. What they said was, well, if it feels right, we'll do it. So I had to go to the side of the stage and just sort of, see if anybody came towards me. And they did.
How do you feel when you're playing after 28 years?
It felt like we'd done our previous gig about 2 days before.
Yeah, it did feel
It was
right.
quite extraordinary. We first started playing within 2 bars. I thought, this is ridiculous. It sounds just like us immediately. And it sounded like as if it just felt as if, this was our next gig and we'd done the last one a couple of days ago.
Very weird that was.
Yeah.
Actually, I said in a radio interview the other day that it was like looking down St. Colin and Paul, and Paul, as usual, fiddling with his amp and not quite hearing what's going on. It was just like it was yesterday. It was quite funny.
So it didn't cross your mind to go on a tour or something just for a couple of dates? No.
Because that's
How about if it made any money? Like, I'm sure it makes some money.
Well, that wasn't the prime consideration then, and it isn't now really.
Yeah.
it's
You have to do things for the right reasons, I think.
someone asked me that on the radio the other day, and the thing is, it's been 30 years, and people's music directions have gone in working in different areas. So the only reason you'd be coming back together would be for money, because people want you to play the old songs. But then if you start to get into new areas, it wouldn't be the Zombies anymore.
Yeah. True.
And
I find the thought quite depressing, actually. You have to do things. When we came together, when we were in our first incarnation, we were there because we all loved the same sort of music. We were filled with enthusiasm about getting the band together and what we could do and where it might go, musically and everything else. That's why we did it. We all had a common sort of enthusiasm and interest. And if we did it now, it would be simply to try and cash in on something. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. Do you ever think of appearing in films or television series just like the Monkees?
listen, if we had a problem with image in the early days, that would really finish it.
Really, they were actors who played music a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we were musicians who definitely didn't act,
Anyway, the Monkees were a derivation of the Beatles' Help film, not Help, Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, and then
Anyway, after our biggest peak, which was in film acting, which was in fact working with Laurence Olivier, and Keir Dullea. Oh yes, equal billing.
Caroline Lee.
With an Otto Preminger film with Caroline Lee and Laurence Olivier.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you do with that?
We did that in about 1965, 66.
What did you do in the film?
Well, we
with
did 3
lots of
days
things,
filming.
really.
Yeah, that's right. We did 3 days filming.
But very little in the film.
Yes, that's right. we had equal billing. It actually had the Zombies at the top, didn't it? Noel Coward, Laurence Olivier, Keir Dullea, Caroline Lee. And when we went to see the premiere, we appeared in a bar scene on a television set behind Laurence Olivier and Keir Dullea arguing. That was us. We spent 3 days.
Olivier took one look at the television with us on there, walks across the bar and turned it off.
And I really burst out laughing at the memory because we hadn't seen it.
Amazing. This goes to Chris. He said to Alec at one point in the interviews, very clearly in the book set, that the most important thing is to know that you affect other people's lives. Like you have this, craving, this will to power to over other people's, behavior and stuff like that.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
The music has affected other people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Was one of the motivating factors behind, you're pursuing a